there's some music playing.
2003 movie The Last Samurai, starring Tom Cruise, captures the rapid changes that were happening in Japan during the Meiji Restoration during the late 1800s, as Japan was adopting Western customs in order to become a great modern nation. The film covers tensions of a nation wanting to keep its own culture and tradition while at the same time adopting Western customs to remain a competitive and powerful force in the world. Flash forward over 200 years later, and Westerners have been fascinated with Japan as a culture so vastly different than ours, yet simultaneously just as advanced. There is something about Japanese culture that is so captivating, inspirational, beautiful, and sometimes even disturbing. Everyone watching this video has some familiarity with Japanese culture and commercial products, especially electronics, pop culture, and information technology. You might have even heard of the phrase, Japan is 10 years in the future. This is usually a reference to some piece of information technology that Japanese consumers got earlier than we did, like smartphones, or smart vending machines, or toilets that clean your ass for you. But I would argue that Japan is the future in another way, namely the way in which Western culture has followed many of the same footsteps of Japanese culture in the digital age, for better and for worse. Now, Japan is arguably one of the most impressive societies on the planet, but it's not without its flaws. Now, in the West, we've seen a controversial rise in a certain brand of populism, which opposes immigration and free trade while embracing social tradition. This traditional populism is simultaneously being interwoven with an embrace of technology, most notably seen with the tech baron Elon Musk. However, Japan was one of the few developed countries that did not see a rise in this form of populism. Why? Because it had already embraced those ideas. Japan barely lets in any immigrants, has protectionist trade policies, and has widespread automation. On top of that, the hyper-digitalization of Japan has in part contributed to a society which is deeply interconnected digitally, yet ever more isolated socially. Likewise, the Zoomer generation, the first generation of Westerners to have no recollection of what life was like before the internet, is also very isolated socially. Like Japan, many Western Zoomers have more digital connections but less IRL connections compared to their older generations. The story gets worse for romantic relationships. Less young people are dating, having sex, falling in love, and starting families. This trend started in Japan, a country with one of the worst birth rates. But this is an issue for nearly every developed nation now. Dating apps have given us access to a wide variety of partners, but the design of the apps has led to less and less people pair bonding, or even getting each other's reproductive organs wet. Meanwhile, the makers of these apps get millions in revenue. Just as Japan has adopted many of the trends of the West during the industrial age, Westerners have embraced many aspects of modern Japanese culture during the digital age. Now, if you think that the distinction between seeing someone in person versus seeing someone via a virtual interface is minor, let me ask you this. Is it the same experience to see a picture of the pyramids of Giza on Google Images as it is to see them in person? On the opposite side of the spectrum is the experience of reading text describing the smell of shit, the same as smelling actual shit. I rest my case. Digital connections are important, but they're not a replacement for IRL connections. Otherwise, live concerts, live theater, meetup groups, business trips, and international conferences would not exist. Speaking of digital connection / real-world isolation, the internet has also led to isolation in various cyber villages. If you are a Democrat, you can exclusively cater your digital diet to online circles who validate what you already believe in. The same goes for leftists, Christians, Muslims, conservatives, Hindus, atheists, libertarians, vegans, anti-vegans, and even nudists. Digital echo chambers can lead to bonding with people online over sharing their beliefs, but the relationships are shallow and can devolve into groupthink. And by only listening to people who reaffirm your beliefs, you are not sharpening your mind with the whetstone of disagreement. You are simply butting heads with people you mostly agree with. Social media has provided a path to fame and notoriety that would have never existed with old media, but at the same time, while there are far more celebrities, namely e-celebrities, than ever before, the intrusive nature of social media has led to the decline of what made celebrities so alluring in the first place: mystique. Actors and actresses of the golden age of Hollywood, a certain allure of mystery to them. Today, you now know what your favorite e-influencer had for lunch. Speaking of bygone times, we have seen a decline in organized religion, which oftentimes is attributed to the internet. This goes back to the first major internet social movement I spoke about, the New Atheists. The New Atheists told us that as society secularizes, we would become more rational, reasonable, and accept facts as they are. Since that movement gained traction, we certainly have seen a decline in religiosity, but needless to say, we have not seen an increase in rationality, fact-based policy, or logic.
Shut your mouth! You're not God or my father or my boss! Dude, you want to step outside? You want to step outside? Huh? I'm not scared of you, pal.
Enough.
You shut up too.
Shut the fuck up.
Go ahead and attack me, big.
Now, I'm a secular humanist, as I don't adhere to any organized religion, but I must disagree with the core premise of the New Atheists. They thought that people are irrational because of religion. I think religion is oftentimes irrational because people are oftentimes irrational. And speaking of people oftentimes say facts don't care about your feelings. This is true, but the opposite is also true. Feelings don't really care about facts. Anyone who has taken a look at some of the tweets that get tens of thousands of likes knows this. With social media, people can connect with others with similar feelings, which oftentimes leads to communal fact denialism. This is part of a wider trend I've noticed from digital optimism to digital pessimism. The turning point of this was how social media led to the toppling of then dictator of Egypt, Hosni Mubarak. Many people thought that this was proof that the internet would lead us to democracy, kittens, and ice cream. Instead, it only led to an election in which a fundamentalist won, followed by a military coup. But don't confuse cynicism for realism. I'm a pessimist in the short run, but an optimist in the long run. You can ignore reality in the short run, and even in the medium run, with social media algorithms, but in the long run, reality will always come to give your feelings an ass kicking. But rationality isn't everything either, and maybe the rational approach is to acknowledge that we humans need some emotional connection. Otherwise, the only form of intimacy comes from gooning. Now, what the future holds for sure, I don't know. AI has the potential to create cataclysmic changes in our digital ecosystems and even the physical world. But I hope, as naive as I may be, that AI will be supplementary to natural intelligence rather than succeed it. Granted, natural intelligence isn't always that intelligent, especially not on social media. But I say optimistic knowing that artificial intelligence doesn't always act intelligent either. Rationality and technology are great, but maybe we need some modern mythology. Let's go back to where we all started, with philosopher Marshall McLuhan, who spoke about a global village, where all of our messages are shaped by the global interconnected medium. Sometimes, the global village helps us crowdfund medical bills for cancer patients, and other times the global village becomes a pixelated, crap-flinging contest where the lowest of the low duke it out to see who could win the title of biggest internet moron. And given the vast and ruthless competition, this is quite an impressive feat.
I want Szechuan sauce. Where's my Szechuan sauce? I'm Kendall Rick! My beloved Dum Dum! I'm Kendall Rick! Rick!
Humans started off as tribes and isolated bands, which coalesced into small isolated villages, each with their own culture. Each village varied slightly when it came to the beliefs, traditions, rituals, etc., along a continuum to the point that if you moved far away from the first village, you'd arrive in a completely different culture, unaware of the existence of the first village. Geography has created polyculture, or various cultures. But with the rise of empires, larger cultures emerge, sometimes destroying smaller cultures, sometimes ingesting them and incorporating them into a larger whole, sometimes leaving them alone to exist in the periphery, and sometimes not. With the invention of the printing press during the 1400s, print media became democratized, at least in Europe. This would lead to mass literacy, but also mass misinformation that arguably led to the 30 Years' War. With the industrial and later electrical revolutions during the early 19th and 20th centuries, we would see the emergence of monocultures, with national newspapers, radio stations, and television stations. Now, the production of narratives morphed into one whole. This led to unity and social cohesion, at least for most of the time, but also it led to conformity.
Come on, you guys. Only a little. A hungry giant.
Hungry for a big honey taste.
Big taste, honeycomb, big taste.
This changed with social media and streaming services during the 2000s and 2010s, when we moved back into a polyculture. Today, we don't all need to pretend we like the same music, movies, or news sources. If you don't like mainstream artists like Taylor Swift singing about why her last breakup, like all of her breakups, are never her fault, then you can always listen to some obscure indie band to feel better about yourself. If you don't like listening to Anderson Cooper report on CNN, you can always listen to Alex Jones yell about fish-human hybrids on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Oh, God. They had in tanks people with gills and their little baby.
The polyculture has also given us access to new ideas and new sources of purpose, but it's also led to a meaning crisis. See, in isolated social circles, like these villages that we once lived in, people only had access to the forms of meaning of their physical village, be it in the form of religion, ethnicity, rituals, etc. Today, the internet gives us access to a wide variety of meta-narratives, though. Some will cocoon themselves in online echo chambers dedicated to one meta-narrative, but others will listen to a variety of meta-narratives and contemplate which one to follow. This can lead to novel sources of purpose and meaning, but it can also lead to a nihilistic array of competing meaning systems that may lead some to reject them all in a slurry of indecision, uncertainty, and despair. There are advantages and disadvantages of both the monoculture and polyculture systems. The polyculture era that we entered has led to a garden variety of talentless hacks, grifters, and digital village idiots to spread their content. But it's also democratized access to great innovators, artists, educators, doers, and thinkers. At the end of the day, I still lean to a more pro-internet side, as without digital media, I would never be able to speak to you as I am now, and for that, I'm very grateful.